Okay, we'll call the committee to order and ask the prime sponsor, our first bill, to come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Senate Committee. For the record, my name is Representative Arnie Davis. I live in Milan, New Hampshire. I represent Coos District 2. I'm here as the prime sponsor to introduce House Bill 124. Now, House Bill 124, it's actually a pretty simple bill. It amends RSA 31-113 by adding one sentence to it. So there's over 200 town or community forests in New Hampshire. And I have one in my hometown. It's the town of Milan. It has 3,500 acres, and their goal is to have 5,000 acres. And so these community forests, a lot of them do timber harvesting. We generate about $50,000 a year, and that money is put into the forest fund. The town of Errol has about 8,500 acres. They generate about $200,000 a year. So the three things this money can be spent on is either to buy more land, it could be spent to maintain the forests, or to buy something for the town, can be offered to the town for something like, I'll give you an example, the town of Errol bought a fire truck. The forest bought a fire truck for the town one year, and DRA approved it because they figured it would stop fires and protect the forest. So there's a small loophole, which, like Errol, they have enough land. They don't want to purchase anymore. They have a maintenance fund. They don't need the money for maintaining. They already have that money set aside. So they're generating quite a surplus. And according to the RSA, they have no way, their intent in the beginning was to offer this to the town when they got to this point for tax relief. And according to DRA, that's not allowed. So one sentence had to be added to RSA 31:113, which pretty much said if the committee that runs the town forest deems as a surplus, they can offer that money to the select board. It doesn't mandate it. It says they may offer it to the select board. And the select board would put it in a warrant article for the town to vote on for tax relief. And that's basically all it does. It offers the town some tax relief to be able to spend their own money. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the senators? I have one.
Yes.
We're looking at line 7 on the bill. You've got an or in there. Ors cause me problems when I'm having somebody authorize something. Because what if the forestry committee thinks we should and the conservation committee thinks I shouldn't?
Well, the reason the or is there, they're two separate, you either have a town, let me see what this is.
Representative, may I suggest that we put an and in there instead of the or, and then or as applicable at the end of that phrase, so that it would say the forestry committee and the conservation committee as applicable, because if some town doesn't have one,
Okay, well, I think as applicable would be very good on there. Or you would have one or the other. No town would have both. You would have, that's the reason for the or.
You can ensure me that no town has both? See,
okay.
that's my problem.
Okay.
That's my problem with the or. If there is a town out there that does have both, then which one gets to choose? Or, can one override the other? Right?
No, I have no problem with that as an amendment.
Okay.
As
Any other comments? Any other questions from the senators? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
all right, thank you.
Is there anybody that's changed their mind about testifying? Okay. Come on up.
Thank you to the committee for letting me speak this morning. Apologies, I wasn't going to speak on this. My name's Brody Deshaies. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association. I just want to comment on the discussion of or versus and. Our interpretation would be this or is not an exclusive word. It has to be each year. Forest Committee or Conservation Commission, it's an inclusive or. So, it's kind of enabling that notwithstanding RSA 31:95-B, if the Forest Committee or Conservation Commission. So it's just saying either or can do it. So I think adding an and might complicate things with an assumption that the Forest Committee and the Conservation Commission have to be in lockstep in providing the surplus back with approval of the legislative body. I think the or allows the flexibility of the Forest Committee in a municipality or the Conservation Commission, or both, depending on the year. I do know most municipalities that have a Forest Committee tend not to have a Conservation Commission, but I think there are a few examples of a handful of towns that might have both, but typically most municipalities honestly have a Conservation Commission. So that's part of the reason why the House Municipal, County and Government Affairs Committee added Conservation Commission at the request of some of the members of the committee, knowing that that Conservation Commissions often carry out many of the duties that Forest Committees do. So with that, I'll take any questions if there are any, but I just wanted to
Questions
clarify
from
that.
anybody other than me?
Well, again, can we just say that if the expending authority of that fund, that's who we're talking about, right? It doesn't matter whether you have commissions, who's authorized to expend funds from that fund? There's generally one group of people, it's either a selectman, it's a forest commission, the conservation commission, somebody's in control of the fund is authorized to expend. So we just changed it to say, if the expending authority determines that.
Yeah, I think we'd be happy with that type of clarifying language, but it seems the way that the bill is currently written, that it's the Forestry Committee or the Conservation Commission. They're the ones who determine if they have a, quote, surplus, and then they're the ones who would offer a said surplus to the legislative body for approval at town meeting.
Again, I go back to that. If there are both and they disagree, who decides?
Well, they would have separate funds. So you'd have funds for your Conservation Commission and a fund for your Forestry Committee. So they wouldn't commingle their funds together. So we're talking two different committees that would have two separate kinds of funds that, Forestry committees, they get a certain amount of money from, if they allow someone to cut the timber there. And same with Conservation Commissions, they also will get funds for that, or they might even get easements and revenues through that way. So both are getting revenues because both are overseeing different lands.
I don't see that in this bill, Brody. So, all right. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay, with that, we'll close the public. Oh, I want to read that everyone that signed in, and there were 3 additional people who did not speak, signed in support, and online there were 4 in support, 1 opposed. And with that, we'll close the public hearing. We have 5 minutes. So I'll take a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second to go into executive session. I want to talk in this executive session quickly about the stuff I handed out. Republicans got that packet at caucus, and I've handed you guys. It has to do with the amendment that I am proposing for 464. Doing a whole bunch of stuff in there. And, it's there. The gist of the thing is that to help voters in proving citizenship and other things, and to correct a couple of errors that Secretary of State noted, we need to do a whole bunch of stuff. I did, on the top page, it'll be also an amendment to the language that's in there for 464, because you don't, assistant moderators and inspectors of election are not on the ballot, so they'll never meet the criteria. So I clarified that hopefully a little bit. When you look at the rest of the stuff that's in the package, there's a statement about vital records being able to provide information to the Secretary of State, for verification of voter information. there's a small thing on RSA 263 that talks about motor vehicle registration, and we have a copy of 65445 in the back that you'll be able to see a small change there. This is the master jury list. If a juror comes in and that list is compiled from the DMV records and the voting records, and if somebody comes in and says, I'm not a citizen, I can't be on a jury, certainly we want to know that. Or if they have moved either out of the state or within the state, then the DMV or the voting records are in error, and we just want that reported back so appropriate action can be taken. That may be a 30-day letter or whatever. Registration for a political committee, the way the wording was, according to the Secretary of State, when you filed, you had to put a financial report in. That's not what we really want, I don't think. I think it's when you file, then the next time it comes due, you need to do that. Clarifying, the next thing was on 65412, clarifying that part of citizenship, if you can prove that you were currently registered in another ward, and again, if those records, which you look later, are going to be there, that would be proof that they were registered in another city or town or whatever. If you go to, continuing on, there's a small modification or other official records when they're talking about doing different things, that those records that hopefully the Secretary of State will be providing can be used. The other side of that particular page says that the department shall provide access to the data from the centralized database, registration, etc., and vital records, and that shall be available. We're not restricting the Secretary of State of how he provides it in this, and more than likely, when the amendment is done, I'm going to make that section a year after. That's, we'll pick a date, but we want it for the next big election, so that give him some time. The other parts where he'll have access to the records will be in place, but give him time to figure out how to make it available. The next page that has 65445, that is, with the exception of the red marks in there, allowing them to use the data from the DMV, not only to check the records that we have, but also the records to be entered. So that's, again, back at your polling place, and determine voter eligibility. If you want to know the procedure for the DMV and the Secretary of State, that is contained in this section. So there is a field in the DMV database for people who have a real ID where they check citizen, yes or no, and we want that field. Certainly other data that's in there, and what it says in the existing language is that the Secretary of State and the DMV will come to an agreement. And then the last sheet that I have in my packet, I don't know how yours was ordered. I think they were the same, but on 664.6, right now, if you collect a dime from somebody, you're supposed to record their name, because they may give you, $49.91 more, and therefore then you would have to report them. What this says in the back part is campaign donations at campaign booths at fairs, festivals, or other events, donations for raffles, passing the hat, fundraising activities where individual donations do not exceed $25, and there is no expectation that the donor will exceed $50 over the campaign cycle, etc. You don't have to report them. Okay, you'll put them in the thing, and you'll list, in my case, probably Rochester Fair, whatever, and then you put down the amount. So again, I'm going to submit that to OLS today. I want you guys to know about it, and the public now knows about it. All those things are things that we have talked about in various things, and I don't think it's overly controversial, but that's why you've got it early, so that you can prepare for the non-germane hearing that will happen. Okay? And since
Move to
we're,
come out of executive session?
thank you. We have a motion, and a second, to come out of executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. We are back in, and we have the prime sponsor for our next bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and honorable committee members. As a prime sponsor, I appreciate the opportunity to introduce this bill to you today, House Bill 138 Local. For the record, I am Representative Diane Power. I represent the towns of Brookline, Mason, and Greenville in Hillsborough County District 36. I also serve as the chairman of the House Municipal and County Government Committee. So this bill before you is a bipartisan bill in the House. It has bipartisan co-sponsorship. And under current law, a governing body they can choose to include tax impact notation on the warrant. And alternatively, there's enabling statute by which the legislative body may vote to require that such a tax impact notation be included. Also, it's important to note that under current law, the tax impact notation is for the upcoming fiscal year only. And this information would be sufficient for expenditures that are 1 year. However, with multi-year expenditures, warrant articles that have multi-year expenditures, this information is incomplete and insufficient. So the issue is, and additionally, the issue with regards to bond warrant articles is that typically the first year costs and tax impacts are very small compared to subsequent years. So House Bill 138 addresses this problem by simply expanding the enabling statute to require that if a tax impact notation is to be printed on the warrant through the vote of the legislative body, then the estimated tax impact shall be included on the warrant for the first 5 years. And for any, so, but if the warrant article has less than a 5-year looking forward tax impact, it would simply be any of the years up to the 5 years. By including this information, this provides full disclosure and transparency to the voters so that they are better informed when they go to vote on spending. So for these reasons, I urge the committee to recommend this bill ought to pass. And I would like to thank you for your consideration of this legislation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee members? Have you looked at House Bill 284?
This is being heard today?
Yep.
Yes, I have. And
Any conflicts or concerns with the two bills?
thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that question. So when I saw the LSRs being filed, I reached out to the prime sponsor of that bill, and I had a discussion to see if there's any way that we could merge the two bills. So you will see, and I'm sure you have as you reviewed the bills, is that that particular bill, that is a mandate by the state, whereas my bill is, like I said, it expands upon the enabling statute, and it just says, like I had said during my bill introduction, that if the legislative body chooses to include a tax impact notation, then it will show the multi-years. So like I said, this other bill is a mandate by the state, that there's no choice by the legislative body. And also we had the discussion, and so the provision for multi-year tax impacts, that you see in this bill is included in that bill. That's more of a mandate by the state. So no, there is no conflict, in my opinion.
Okay. Further questions by any committee members? Senator Lang.
Thank you. I just want to be clear. So yours is a permissive bill allowing the town to choose to vote. The other bill is a mandate. However, the things that are mandated in that bill is also included in this bill.
No, it's the second part of your statement. It's the inverse. The idea for my bill to include the multi-year tax impacts is included in that bill that you will hear later today.
Thank you.
I believe that they are different chapters in the law. Well, 32:5 and 30. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Representative Bernardi here? I'd like you to come up and testify on this bill also. Yeah, 138. You guys are putting the same kind of language in different bills, and so I want you up here. And
Thank
it's
you,
my
Senator.
prerogative.
Thank you, Senator. Happy to be here.
All right, you
Representative
tell me
J.D.
about the conflict between the two bills.
284 is a requirement bill on, it requires that you put a statement in about the cost of any warrant article in simple language, not mill rates that people don't understand, but X dollars per thousand property value. And if you have a contract that goes out, multiple years, then the first 5 years of that contract's costing needs to be estimated. And then at the end of all the warrant articles, you have to have a summary, say, all right, if you voted yes on all of these, same thing, simple statement, not a mill rate issue, no violation of transparency here.
What I'm trying to get you to concentrate on is whether the two bills are compatible or whether they conflict or whether, that kind of thing. Because we're going to hear your bill in a few minutes. So are there conflicts?
I don't see as conflicts. I see the bill that you're 138 is more enabling like, but 284 is a requirement. You must do this. You must change your procedures to adopt these rules.
Okay, and you'll be back up to testify in a few minutes. Any questions from any of the senators? Seeing none, all right, we'll move on to Representative Colby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Representative Elena Colby. I represent Bowen Hopkinton for Merrimack District 9. I also happen to be, although not testifying in this capacity, a selectman in the town of Bow. I'm here to express my firm opposition to HB 138. The discussion that just took place, whether this is enabling legislation or not, is a little misleading. The bill states that they shall, municipalities shall. That in and of itself is dictating a mandate. It aims to impose on municipalities that have adopted current impact notations on warrant articles by compelling them to forecast financial implications for a 5-year period. Most municipalities do already voluntarily provide tax impact analysis on warrant articles, whether they've adopted this provision or not. This is commendable and reflects a commitment to informing their constituents. However, requiring them to project 5 years out introduces an unrealistic expectation, given the many unpredictable variables that influence municipal finances. Shifting bond rates, unexpected refinancing opportunities, property reassessments, changes in tax credits or exemptions, and the ebb and flow of revenue streams can all dramatically alter a fiscal landscape for a community. Moreover, the state does require that estimated rates that are posted can assume no revenue as offset, which places municipalities in a precarious position. For instance, if 80% of a project's funding comes from a grant and only 20% is from local property taxes, this bill would erroneously necessitate that municipalities present the project as fully impacting taxpayers. This distortion of the facts misleads voters and undermines their ability to make informed decisions. By compelling local governing bodies to present these flawed forecasts, HB 138 directs municipalities toward disseminating misleading information rather than fostering a transparent governance that we all strive for. The approach jeopardizes community trust, compelling voters to make significant long-term decisions that are based on projections that could be fundamentally inaccurate. Furthermore, the legislation places local officials in an untenable position in choosing to violate fiduciary or ethical responsibilities. So this isn't just a policy issue. It strikes at the very heart of the integrity of local governance. I urge you as state leaders to reject the proposal as it threatens to encumber local officials and hamper their ability to operate honestly and effectively for the benefit of their communities. I never imagined I would find myself in front of New Hampshire state senators, urging them to support their communities and school districts' desire to share truthful and accurate information. But I hope that your vote reflects that you respect your constituents' right to this information. Thank you.
Senator Perkins Spoken.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony, Representative. So you just mentioned fiduciary duties. Could you talk a little bit more about how this puts student fiduciaries in conflict?
Well, in the grand scheme of fiduciary duties, right? So we look at, we have a fundamental duty to present accurate information when we are telling our constituents that the fire department needs a new fire truck. I need to be able to accurately forecast the cost. Not all municipalities have what we refer to as a CIP committee. So it'd be a capital improvement plan where they can couch a fire truck and save for it over multiple years. They may have to bond that fire truck. And at the time that you present the warrant article, you don't know what that bond rate is. So we're just assuming, that this is the current rate, and I keep hearing this estimate roll around. Well, if you start estimating with $100,000 here and $1 million here, by the time you're done estimating on a $12 million budget, which is similar to what our town is, you could be way off. And I just don't think that does right by your voters.
Yeah. Thank you.
Senator Lang.
A couple questions. So, first off, this is at the request, the tax, is it, as I read the bill and the way it's written, the first part is that this is at the request of a vote. If the town votes to require that the selectmen include some sort of tax impact statement. So this is a constituent request that the selectmen do this, isn't it?
It is initially, but with the addition, what the proposal is that we now include multi-year tax impacts. So the way I'm reading that is, shall you already have adopted this process, you are automatically taking on this new mandate.
So again, so in the first instance, it's a citizen request, and now we're just, your objection is the fact that the multi-year is your objection.
Yes, I just think it's irresponsible.
One more question. So again, are you familiar with, and I apologize, I can't remember the Supreme Court decision from when I was on the school board and I had to do a union contract with the teachers, and there's a requirement in education that you show the multi-year cost of a given contract to the voters so they know what they're voting on as a whole. You don't think this is an analog or parallel to the same exact process we're doing here?
Yeah, and it's the same way for CBAs for,
Right.
police or fire, and I do 100% agree with that. I have no, this is significantly more money typically that we're talking about. And my fear is the inaccuracies once you add them all together, the culmination of the inaccuracy.
One more, I guess.
Sure.
Again, when you sign a lease for a vehicle or going into a lease for a fire truck or an ambulance or any lease type process, you do know what your multi-year costs are, don't you?
You do, but that's not the same projection. So with, I was in the car business, so I appreciate this question. I'll try not to dive off the cliff. Those are set payments, unless you are doing a balloon payment. That your payment is not going to change on a lease for a car. But this is not the case for these purchases.
Okay.
I have a question. The way I interpret your testimony, it is better to give the voter no information than an estimate. Is that what you were really telling me?
I think that a 1 year is the most accurate. And I would be sitting here, or maybe not sitting here, but I would support this if it was just a mere fact of revealing to the voter what could potentially be. But to put it down in a warrant article is the concern. That is a legally binding document.
Again, I'm trying to interpret what you said. So I give them 1 year and not tell them anything about future years. Is that what you're
I
want
think
me to
people
do?
understand that we need to give the voters credit, that they understand if we're bonding and we're talking about 20-year bond, that means we're over the course of 20 years. I don't think we should be forcing communities to vote based on information that we do not know is accurate.
Again, it sounds to me like no information is better than an estimate.
No, that is not
Okay.
what I am intending to
Any
portray
other
here.
questions from the senators? Thank you very much. I'm going to take another opposed first, so Brody, come on up, and we'll save somebody that's in support for last. So bookend it.
Awesome. Thank you, senators, and thank you to the committee for letting me speak. My name is Brody Shays. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and we are speaking in opposition to House Bill 138. Previous speaker kind of highlighted many of the points that I wanted to talk upon, like, for example, bond rates can change over years, how much land you have exempt or, that you provide tax credits to can change, assessed values can change, so the mill rate will change. So in many ways, while you're trying your best to estimate and project out, the rates will change, and even people's property value relative to their neighbors will also change. We know when a reassessment happens, a third of people tend to kind of win, a third to tend to their tax bills don't change, and a third see their tax bills increase. So, and typically reassessments are done within every 5 years. More typical every about 3 years, you reassess the entire municipality, but it depends on how much resources you have and how large your municipality is. So with all those variables, trying to cost out over a 5-year period can be difficult for some municipalities. Ultimately, what House Bill 138 would do is, right now it is a voter option to require tax rate impacts, or a governing body can do it on their own fruition or even choose which warrant articles if it isn't required by their legislative body. This would mean that if your legislative body currently requires you to do tax rate impacts, you would also be required to do multi-year impacts for those multi-year warrant articles or lease agreements. Now we will concede lease agreements, that fixed costs. So that's actually, not an unreasonable thing to require, where you're talking about projecting, like, that cost. All those other variables I mentioned, though, regarding, the rate impact, the tax rate could change for how much you're paying towards that lease amount. I will point out, though, in Section 2 of the bill, typically when the state introduces a new mandate to a voter-adopted provision in law, it usually will ask the municipalities to have another vote for the legislative body to consent to that change in state law. In Section 2 of this bill, it overrides that. It says that even though you've taken a legislative action to adopt the existing RSA 32 colon 5, Roman V-B, instead you won't have to have an additional vote, which is just overriding the existing decision of the legislative body. So currently voters have opted into a current system, and the state would be essentially changing the rules and mandating a new system without the voters' consent. In many ways, it's like, Lucy pulling the football away from Charlie Brown. So we would ask the committee to vote this bill inexpedient to legislate and recognize that municipalities already can do this if they feel willing to and they feel as if they're capable of doing it for multi-year warrant articles. And I also want to point out with CBAs, collective bargaining agreements, those contracts, typically it's not done with tax rate, it's typically done with dollar amounts. And you have a general idea of about how many employees you're going to have under that CBA for the multi-years and how much that CBA is going to cost. So for example, with a 2-year CBA, you might have a percentage increase in pay and benefits 1 year and, a different percentage the next year. You can cost that out fairly accurately. Whereas compared to bonded warrant articles over a 5-year period, again, that rate can change and you can refinance, and we've seen with the economy how much things are in fluctuation at the moment. So thank you for taking my testimony. I'll yield to any
Questions from the
questions.
senators? Seeing none, thank you very
Thank you.
much. Mr. Power?
Thank you, committee members, Chairman Gray. For the record, my name is Eric Power. I'm from Brookline. I also serve as the president of the School District Governance Association of New Hampshire, and also I'm in my 5th year on the Brookline Planning Board. I'm testifying in support of this bill. It's a common sense bill. It's one sentence. It's bipartisan. Basically, voters want to know how much a warrant article is going to cost them, both this year and in future years. So by adding this one statement about having the tax impact for up to 5 years, if it's up or however many years the contract is, it makes a lot of sense because voters want to know what they're getting into. And when you look at a warrant, some people actually will read a warrant and decide whether or not they're going to come to the meeting or, maybe vote at an SB2 election. So it provides information to the voters clearly and in the warrant about how much they're going to spend on each warrant article. And that may even motivate some people to come to the town meeting, school district meeting, what have you. And it also is useful information. If you have SB2, it's actually on the ballot when you vote. I had an example in Brookline a few years ago where we had a bond and it said it's going to cost you $0.05 per thousand. And, but the piece you didn't know, it went up to 31 cents per thousand in year 2 because the first year was just a small incremental interest only payment. But people didn't realize what they were voting for. They didn't see that information. If they see, especially with bonds, it's important to see what you're getting into because the first year is almost always, in some cases, it could even be zero because we had a land acquisition where it was zero. The first year, they deferred all the payments. Also with leases, you always have balloon payments at the end if you want to choose to purchase something at the end. So putting that full transparency out there is good for voters. It's important for bonds, for leases, for collective bargaining agreements, especially if it's a standardized collective bargaining agreement, they would have the dollar numbers, but a lot of people don't how to translate a dollar number into a tax impact. And that's where it's really useful so that people understand what it means. Man, this is going to cost $267,000. What does that mean? Oh, that means your tax rate is going to go up 13 cents per thousand. That's the information they want to know. And they want to know that for years 1, 2, 3, sometimes CBAs are up to 5 years. In our town, we have 2 school districts in our town, so we have 3 different meetings. And in our Brookline school district and our town, we've adopted this legislation to have the tax impact. And people have come up to me and said, Eric, why don't we know how much bonds are going to cost second and third year? And I says, well, it's not required in the law because they can just tell you the first year and get away with it. In our co-op, we've never been able to pass it. We've tried, but they don't want to have it. They don't want this legislation at that level. The key is for this is it's an estimate. It's the estimate, the best estimate that the governing body can come up with. Is it inaccurate? It might be off a little bit, but it's an estimate and it's way better than having no information. So people want to know what the impact is. Is it going to be pennies, dimes, or dollars? That's really what you're looking at. And as far as applicability, we've passed it in 2 of our political subdivisions. I don't know of someone who would say, no, I don't want this if we are now going to know about the multi-year tax impacts. Of course, everybody wants to know. That's why we put that forth. So I think that argument is a little hollow. I think that, adding this into the enabling legislation makes a whole lot of sense. And I hope that you find this ought to pass as to help improve transparency in towns and school districts across the state. And with that, I'll take any
Questions
questions.
from the senators? Senator?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if you could just, the case where you described in Brookline where it was a 5 cent per thousand and then it went up dramatically. I mean, I put that to vote on a 5 cents per thousand expenditure is a pretty rosy picture. And, you know, I can think of other instances in my lifetime where a town has adopted a proposal and then all of a sudden it's ballooning out of control and we realize that we didn't get the full order. So you know, there is a question here. So you're asserting that even with the estimates put into this, that would give a taxpayer a better idea of even the worst case scenario. But if I'm understanding you right, a worst case scenario, maybe even a better position to go on because it prepares for contingencies.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, so if you looked at it, we have SB2 for this particular district. So the ballot said tax impact 5 cents per thousand. I would, and we also had a contingent warrant article about a lease that said, I think it was 20 something cents per thousand. So people voted down the lease. They said, that's expensive, but I can do this bond. I would contend if people saw a nickel and then they saw 31 cents, 28 cents, 29 cents, whatever it was for the amortization, they would have maybe voted differently and might have considered the lease versus the bond. And it wasn't transparency. And, you know, in the next year when we had the operating budget was bigger, like, where's that increase coming from? Oh, that's from the bond you passed. It just went up, almost 5-6x. So I think having the transparency helps inform the voters to know what they're getting into both this year and in future years. And I think that's why it's a really good idea. It's not a partisan thing. It's just letting you know what you're getting into.
All one.
So why would anybody be opposed to transparency?
I do not understand that unless you just want to pass things and not let people know how much they cost until it's too late. And I don't think that's right, but some people might want to do that. I don't know why, but I'm always for transparency.
So nothing in this bill would stop a person who believes that the estimates are incorrect or believes that they're totally wrong from pointing out those inaccuracies to the voters. Is that correct?
That's correct. It could
Thank
be
you.
brought up at a deliberative session or at a traditional meeting. It is an estimate by the governing body. Thank you.
All right, seeing no one else on the list, there was one person who also signed in, did not wish to speak, in opposition, and online there was 9 in support, 1 opposed, and with that we'll close the public hearing, and we'll open the next one in just a minute. I want the two of you to talk about, because I hate bills that do the same statute. And so I want the two of you to work together to see if you can't give me an amendment that would incorporate both of your bills. That will give me the option of doing one bill, the other bill, or the combined, okay? You got a week, or actually less than a week, because I want it on Monday morning, okay? Are you ready? Okay. We'll open the public hearing on HB 168.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and honorable committee members. As the prime sponsor, I appreciate the opportunity to introduce to you today House Bill 168. For the record, I am Representative Diane Power. I represent the towns of Brookline, Mason, and Greenville in Hillsborough County District 36. I also serve as the chairman of the House Municipal and County Government Committee. House Bill 168 is a bipartisan bill that passed the House on the consent calendar with a unanimous committee recommendation of ought to pass. This is a very simple bill. It is 3 words. It adds public works facilities to the current list of eligible capital facilities for which an impact fee may be assessed. In fact, impact fees may be assessed by planning boards on new development or construction that impacts the need for municipal expanded or new municipal facilities. Currently in New Hampshire RSAs, there are 21 eligible capital facility purposes specified for which an impact fee may be assessed. They include public water and sewer, stormwater, public roads, municipal offices, public schools, public safety, solid waste, public libraries, and recreation. However, the bill and the law currently does not include public works facilities, which to me appears to be an oversight. Based on my research in the past 5 years, there are at least 6 municipalities that have constructed or expanded public works facilities. And however, due to our current laws, they are unable, the planning boards are unable to assess impact fees for these municipal facilities. So in sum, the addition of public works facilities to the current list of eligible capital facilities to me is both fair and a reasonable addition to our current statutes. And I urge the committee to recommend ought to pass on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my bill introduction. Happy to
Questions from
take
the
questions.
senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Eric? Can't repeat anything she said now, you know? I hope she smiled at that one too, eh?
Thank you, Chairman Gray. For the record, I'm Eric Power from Brookline, and I also serve on the Brookline Planning Board. I'm in my 5th year, since 2021. This is a simple bill. It happened in Brookline, but it's happened in other towns. We have built a new public works facility back in 2022, and we cannot collect impact fees. We went through our impact fee schedule recently, and the voters approved it at the March meeting, but we could not, we met with NRPC, our National Regional Planning Commission, and we said we wanted to collect on our public work facility, and they said, well, it's not in the law. You can't do that right now. And we were questioning what happens, but we realized it was probably an oversight. So we also realized our next door neighbors in Hollis and also in Nashua also have DPW facilities, and they can't collect impact fees, and there's a few others across the state. So it's a very simple bill. By adding it in there to let us as a planning board place an impact fee based on, the impact has to be that it's being driven by growth in the town, and then it would go to the voters for approval. I think this is a very simple bill, and I hope that you find it ought to pass. Thank you.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. That's the last person on the list. There were 2 other people who signed in, did not wish to speak in support, and the online sign up. Get the right sheet. Yeah, take that one. Trying to find the online sheet for this bill. Oh, there it is. Was 2 in support, 0 opposed. And with that, we'll close the public hearing on this, and we'll open the public hearing in just a minute. All right, ready? Okay. Prime sponsor?
Good morning again, Chairman and committee. For the record, prime sponsor, Representative J.D. Bernardi, Rockingham 36, which is Hampton Falls, Kensington, Southampton, Newton, and Plastow. So again, we're dealing with, I think, a very simple, common sense bill that's going to bring transparency to the town ballot. It's a bill that constituents have requested. So the first part of the bill simply requires that all votes on budgetary matters that used to be a may record and may advise the voters on becomes a shall advise the voters on how your budgetary finance people voted. The remainder of the bill deals with the various warrant article provisions. And the first being the warrant article, any warrant article is required to have a tax impact statement. It's that if you vote for this warrant, if this warrant article passes, there will be an estimated tax impact of X dollars per thousand of property valuation. So this is to get away from hiding the ball in identifying the tax impact as some minute decimal mill rate or something, so people can't find it, or in a straight valuation number that is lost as to what the tax impact is going to be. So it's a transparency issue. Then there's the requirement that if you have a multi-year warrant article expense, that you have to identify that tax impact similarly for the first 5 years. And again, this is an estimate. An estimate is not a hard and fast, if you miss by a penny or two, you're going to jail. This is an estimate, a good faith estimate of what the tax impact is going to be for each of the next 5 years. And finally, at the end of the warrant articles, there has to be a summary tax impact statement that says, if you pass all these articles, the net tax impact is going to be X or Y dollars per thousand. It's totally a bill demanding transparency. That's what constituents have asked for. They do not want to have items show up next year that they don't know that they voted for last year. They don't understand. This is to make things clear so that a voter showing up to vote is well informed of what they're doing. Happy to take any
Questions from
questions.
the senators? Senator Lane.
So on line 3, I'm a little confused by the may switching to a shall. That's a process for which the legislative body, town meeting, school district meeting, or anything else, that's the process that is used. If the citizens say, I want to know this and I want you to put this on your warrant. But the way you've written it says they shall vote to require. So there's really no choice of the citizen one way or another. It must be on there, but they still have to vote on it. The only option is yes.
No, the objective here, and this may be, a
I think
problem,
that Senator-
a drafting problem, but the concept, but if you read the laws that existed with the may is.
Representative, hold on for a second.
Yeah.
I think to phrase it differently than the way the senator did, I think if you change the to on that last line to an on, and then requiring, so that you're voting on requiring that to happen. Does
Yes.
that make it clearer what the senator is asking?
Yes, I would agree with that. The objective here is when any budgetary group or finance group meets and they decide on their vote on the warrant article, it's going to appear in front of the public. Their vote is known. It's not a hidden vote.
Additional questions, Senator?
No.
Top of page 2, first line. The town shall also require that. Okay, the town, unless we give them permission, I would suggest the wording in there, you drop that first part and you say a total tax impact summary
Shall be placed.
shall be placed. Okay, again, who's doing, this bill is doing the thing. The town doesn't have a choice in this.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so when you look at that, you can come back and if you and the representative on the other bill actually do give me another amendment, I would appreciate that. Okay,
Thank
additional
you.
questions from the senators? Okay, seeing none,
Thank
we'll
you.
move on. Representative Colby.
Thank you, Senators. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Representative Colby, I represent Bow and Hopkinton in Merrimack District 9. I won't rehash the concerns with this one that were already stated in HB 138. I want to point out a few specifics. HB 284 requires multi-town districts to include a notation of the tax impact for each year for every town under the respective warrant article. This requirement is overburdensome. It is also expensive, as governing bodies would have to produce inaccurate forecasts, but this time for multiple communities, leading to excessively long ballots full of potentially misleading information. I agree that when we're talking about transparency is only good if the information we are relaying to people is accurate, or I feel it just defeats the purpose of being transparent. As an example of multi-district communities, Timberlane School District comprises 4 communities. 5 years worth of tax impact notations for each town would result in 20 entries under the warrant article. The Governor Wentworth School District encompasses 7 communities, which would lead to 35 rates being posted with 5-year projections. Similarly, the Pemmy Baker School District includes 8 communities, resulting in 40 rates being posted for each applicable warrant article over 5 years. The cost of printing these ballots could call into question whether or not the statute could be seen as an unfunded mandate. Even more troubling is that the warrant articles, if they generate revenue on the back end, that revenue cannot be included in the estimated rates published by these communities. I feel this distorts the facts and undermines a principle that I hold, and I hope some of you share, that as elected officials, we have a responsibility to provide voters with accurate fiscal forecasts and all pertinent available information. This ensures that all Granite Staters have the power to make decisions in the voting booth that are best not just for their communities, but also their wallets. And I thank you.
Questions from senators? Seeing none? Oh, Senator Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I mean, I'm hearing that these estimates are 2 cents, 3 cents. Could you give me an example of something that would be of a greater, like if there was a revaluation?
I think that's in our community. What we saw this year with our townwide reevaluation would have been just that. Our tax rate changed by almost $3 per thousand. So yeah, I mean, we're not talking about just pennies in some cases.
Additional question?
Yeah, just an additional one. So something being 21 cents estimated and a reval could be double, or?
It could be lower, it could be higher. Again, when you factor in, all of the other legislation that gets passed, if we are talking about increasing veterans exemptions, if we talk about demanding or, mandating elderly exemptions for a certain age group, I mean, all of these things will play a major factor into the final numbers. And I just feel that, again, if the goal is transparency. We have a common goal, right? We want to give people all of the information that we can, but I also want to make sure that the information I'm providing is accurate and not making promises that I can't deliver on.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
you.
Representative Stephanie Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Gray, and thank you, honorable members of this committee. My name is Stephanie Grund. I am representative for Amherst, which is Hillsborough County 34. This bill requires specific wording on any special warrant article with multi-year impacts. There's no enablement clause, and this takes away the local control what the legislative body would like to see on a warrant article. The specific wording that would be required under this bill is 5 years of estimated tax impact and requires that for a multi-town district, the notation shall be not just for 5 years for a specific town, but to list every single town's 5-year impact on each town's warrant article. So
You're kind of repeating.
So
in a sentence you're not supposed to repeat, so just.
I'm not, so
try to
what
summarize.
I'm putting out is that you're putting on for each town 5 years. So think about a town like Exeter that has six towns in their SAU. So on their warrant article, they're going to see 5 years of impact statements, but for each of the six towns.
Representative, you're almost word for word repeating what
However,
was already
the one piece I'm pointing out,
Representative,
I understand.
thank you.
I just wanted to point out that you would have it for every single town. So my question is, at what point is the quantity of information useful? Many things that Representative Colby already said is accurate. We're concerned about accuracy is one piece, but I'm more concerned about the quantity of information and what are people voting on. If I'm in Amherst, I'm in part of Sohegan School District. I'm not voting on Mount Vernon tax rate. I'm voting on Amherst tax rate. So think about Exeter with 6. Which tax rate are they voting on? And at what point is the information excessive? And how much is useful? I'll leave it at that.
Questions for the representative? Seeing none, thank you very much. Let's see, did I see another rep on here? Yes. J.D. Bernardi. Did you? Oh, you already. Hey. I'm worried about 6 different things at the same time. All right. Representative Power, you were on there.
Oh, I wasn't speaking. I just signed in and support.
Okay. You didn't check the box, yes or no? That's fine. All right, let's see, who else have we got on here? Brody, we'll bring you up next.
Over the sheet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for taking my testimony this morning. I won't repeat some of the things that you've heard previously. I just want to point out House Bill 284, it mandates that the legislative body votes to require governing bodies to add their numerically tallied recommendations to each warrant article. Our concern is we're completely unsure how the state can compel the legislative body to vote yes for that. It also removes language from the existing RSA that permits the governing body to, if it wants, provide these tallies, even if their legislative body doesn't require these numerically tallied recommendations to accompany each warrant article. You might say, what municipalities actually do that? My school board does that. We've never had a vote from the legislative body, but our governing body decided, hey, this might be important information for our voters to know how unified the board is in a proposal for a warrant article, or how maybe there might have been disagreement and that might influence how the voters vote. I'll also point out that some voters in some municipalities are against these numerical tallies because they view it as a governing body influencing the vote. Some municipalities have decided, we will present you with all the financial information, but we're not going to provide you with the governing body's opinion on this. That's for the voters to ultimately decide whether it's at town meeting or an SB2. Some voters do like it, though, because it informs them as to how supportive the governing body may be of a warrant article. So again, we believe that it's best left to the legislative body to determine how it would like its warrant article to be presented to them. I want to point out that this House Bill 284 mandates how the tax impact is written, utilizing the tax impact as a dollar amount per $1,000 of assessed property value, which is fairly standard across municipalities that do tax impact statements, but not every municipality does it that way. There are some municipalities that prefer to just put, hey, this is how much tax effort you would need. There's some municipalities that actually will take the average price of a home, round it to the closest $100,000 or the closest $10,000, and kind of show you, you know, average price of a home. This is how much your tax bill would increase as a pure dollar amount. Some don't include it on their ballot. They'll put a calculator actually on their website, so you can put in your home value and say, you know, if all the warrant articles pass or the budget passes, this is probably about how much your tax rate will go up in the first year. I won't get into some of the other things about, you know, the imperfections in trying to estimate long-term tax impacts, especially for bonded warrant articles and things of that nature. I will point out, though, nothing prevents municipalities from doing the summary statement on the town, in a town warrant or in another public place. Many municipalities do this on their website, or will include it in some of their packets at the deliberative session or at town meeting. I think the last thing I'll mention is the interplay between this bill and the previously heard bill, House Bill 138. And I think, speaking on behalf of our organization, if House Bill 138, how it's amending RSA 32:5, Roman 5-B, we would be okay if the bill was enabling legislation. Ultimately, you know, the legislative body, we believe, should be determining this. So if House Bill 138 was enabling legislation, and then instead of using Section 1 of House Bill 284, but instead making Section 2 of House Bill 284 enabling legislation, then ultimately it would be the governing bodies who would present warrant articles to their legislative body would ultimately decide this, or a petition warrant article could be moved forward for the legislative body to determine if it wants to adopt these bills if they were enabling legislation. And if both bills were enabling legislation, we would support the bills. So, because ultimately the voters would be the ones determining this with input from their governing bodies. And with that, I'll take any questions if you have any.
Questions from senators? Senator Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you know of any ramifications? For example, I do the 5 years on this warrant. It comes up to $1. Then after the 5 years, because this is only done the year that you're voting on a warrant. So after the 5 years, it comes up to $1.50. Actuality. Do you envision any ramifications that voters may have saying, wait a minute, I supported this at $1. It ended up being $1.50 or $1.35. Because it's only done the first year. It's not updated every year. So the estimates may be, you know, although the estimate in the first year is reasonable, on the third year it may not be.
Yeah, so I can definitely see that. So you're talking about if like a long-term contract, if the cost escalates.
Right.
We definitely see that, and we would hope that governing bodies during their budget presentation points that out, and the agreements that they're presenting to their legislative body to approve. Again, all that information is publicly available, so any taxpayer, voting resident, or any, you know, quote, citizen of New Hampshire under RSA 91-A could request that information, and it could be discussed. You know, we think ultimately, rather than a one-size-fits-all mandate, it's better for the governing bodies and also the legislative bodies to determine what's best for their municipality and what's the best information to share that increases transparency, that's wholly accurate, so then everyone can make an informed decision.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Senators.
Is it Jana?
Good morning. Thank you, Senators. My name is Janan Archibald. I am a legislative liaison for the developmental disability community, but I'm not here representing them. I'm here as a concerned citizen. I've lived in my small town for over 20 years, and I usually work the polls in some manner, whether holding signs or inside working. And the number of times that I've heard people say, as a sort of powwow with their neighbors coming or going, how did you vote on those warrant articles? And surprisingly, a lot of the answers are, I don't really know. I just voted yes, or I just voted no, and we'll see what happens. You know, fast forward a few months later, you'll see those same names out on community Facebook pages saying, I just opened my tax bill. How did this happen? I don't understand why my taxes went up. I can't afford $1,000, or I can't afford $2,000. Usually their ire turns towards the state legislature, thinking that it's the legislature responsibility. Then someone chimes in, well, you voted for this. This was on as a result of the warrant articles. And my young daughters just became voting age for the first time. I said, all right, I want to prepare them to go in and vote properly. So I sat down and tried to explain warrant articles to a couple of 18-year-olds. And when you start going through them, they're like, well, what's this? 0.29 cents per thousand. I'm like, well, you're shopping. You're shopping for the community. What do you want to buy? What services? What products? You know, you're choosing how to spend taxpayer money. She's like, and they're like, well, how much is this going to cost? Well, like, it depends. What's the cost of what's the assessment of your house, and what's your tax rate? And they're like, how am I supposed to know that? And she's right. I mean, she doesn't pay the tax bill. Many people in the community don't even see their tax bills. The mortgage company takes care of it for them. And it's confusing. And it's heartbreaking to me to see my community members open their tax bills and have a heart attack when their taxes have gone up. So if there's any, I was thinking in society, like, where in society do we ask people to pay for something without giving a running total or telling them how much it is? It's like going to a restaurant and saying, you can buy a half-pound steak and I'm going to charge you $5 per ounce. And your peas are going to be 50 cents if your steak is over an ounce and 30 cents if it's under an ounce. And you have to take out your calculator to try to compute your meal. And you don't find out until you've paid. And then in order to find out what the itemization is, you have to go to a public hearing, ask your neighbors, or look on a website. And that's sort of the analogy of how we handle the cost of warrant articles. We have a young society that everything is computed for them. You know, they don't have to add or subtract or do anything. It's all online. And now we're asking them to make decisions that impact people severely. I mean, we're making decisions on whether you can have a new fire engine or expand the school, or are we running people out of town that can't afford their taxes? I mean, these are big things. And I think we as stewards of society should do everything in our power to give people the right information. So when they make that decision, they're making it informed, and they're considering not only themselves, but the well-being of their community. And so that being said, I support this bill and I hope it passes.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. Eric?
Thank you, Chairman Gray and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Eric Power from Brookline, formerly served as a school board member in the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District for 3 years. And I'm speaking in favor of this article. This is an article that would really be a game changer, I think, for school districts and towns across the state. Part of the problem we have is rising taxes, especially school taxes. And people don't know, how did we get here? How much do things cost? And some school districts and towns, there's enabling legislation. Sometimes people can pass it, sometimes they can't. This makes it mandatory for all school districts and towns to provide this tax impact information on every warrant article. When we get our town report, we have the warrant articles that are in there, and they would, if you have passed this bill, it would also have all the tax impacts in there. There'll be arguments that people say, well, the information's available in our handout and here and there. But if you actually have it right in the warrant, you know everybody has it and it's convenient. The other thing that I like about this bill.
Just be careful because we're going over the
Yes,
same.
I understand. Yes, Senator. I like the standardized way that it shows it, that people can understand it. They know their house is worth $800,000. They see the tax impact. They can instantly, if they have to use a calculator, they can know how much this warrant article is going to cost them. I think it's important to have it for both. You got to think of a traditional meetings as well as SB2. Traditional meetings, it's on the warrant. And at the end of the warrant, a lot of people say to me, Eric, if we pass everything, how much are my taxes going to go up? Well, right, if you pass this bill, they will easily go to the bottom of the warrant and see that information. What if I'm in the co-op? How much is it going to cost Hollis? How much is it going to cost Brookline? I kind of care about Hollis, but I care more about Brookline because that's where I live. So it's important for each town to know what its impact is in a multi-town district. The standardized form is good. And to keep in mind, the information in here is the best available estimate. So people can understand, can it be off a little bit later? Yes, it could. But it's based on the best available information that you have at the time. I'd also say on line 3, you could fix that by just taking out, after shall, just take out the vote to, just delete those two words, and I think it'll just say the town shall require. I think that would be an appropriate amendment to clear that up. I think it's also important, this wasn't mentioned, but sometimes you'll have an adversarial school board against a budget committee or a select board against a budget committee, and the select board and the school board can decide, well, we don't really want the voters to know how the budget committee voted, so we're not going to include it because we don't have to. So they might not want to put the information on there. So in the interest of transparency, it makes sense to have all that information available on how our elected officials have voted and recommended articles. For those reasons, I wholeheartedly support this bill, and I hope that you find it ought to pass.
Questions from senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. There were 2 additional people who signed in, 1 in support and 1 opposed. And the online count was 10 support, 1 opposed. And with that, we will close public hearing and open the next one in just a minute. Okay, you ready? Okay. We'll open the public hearing on House Bill 200 and ask the prime sponsor to introduce the bill.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman and honorable committee members. As the prime sponsor, I appreciate the opportunity to come before you today to introduce House Bill 200. For the record, I am Representative Diane Power. I represent the towns of Brookline, Mason, and Greenville in Hillsborough County District 36, and I also serve as the chairman of the House Municipal and County Government Committee. This bill before you was filed upon the request of a number of our constituents across the state. So as you may know, under current RSA, via enabling statute, a political subdivision of the state may vote to adopt a local tax cap, and a 3/5 majority is required in order to adopt a local tax cap. Additionally, under current RSA, the legislative body can override the local tax cap by a simple majority vote. So as a result, a tax cap, in my opinion, does very little to cap or limit taxation. And what that means is that a local tax cap is simply a starting point by which the governing body or an official budget committee, what they can bring, it's a starting point with what they can bring to the annual meeting and propose for all warrant articles that have a tax impact. So what this bill does is it simply modifies the vote threshold required to override a local tax cap from a simple majority to a 3/5 majority. And there are several reasons why a supermajority makes sense. First, a tax cap, as I stated, is adopted by a 3/5 majority, not a simple majority. And since the purpose of a tax cap is to restrain taxation, it is therefore reasonable to require a supermajority to override it. And that also indicates that the voters support any increased spending. Second, a higher bar of a 3/5 majority is required for bonds, notes, and multi-year lease agreements without an escape clause, due again to the increased financial commitment in future years of these types of expenditures. Similarly, any increased spending that would seek to override a local tax cap is, to me, a similar extraordinary financial commitment for taxpayers, and therefore it makes sense to require a 3/5 majority. Third, a supermajority is required to override a school district budget cap. That's new statute that was passed last year. And fourth and lastly, a supermajority is required to override a city tax cap. So importantly, this bill, House Bill 200, aligns the vote threshold to override a local tax cap which to me is important to make our laws consistent across the state with regards to tax caps in cities. And it's important to note that this bill in no way limits the ability of a legislative body to either increase or decrease the amount of any single appropriation or the total amount of all appropriations. And to conclude, I appreciate your consideration, and I would urge the committee to vote and recommend House Bill 200 ought to pass.
From the senators. Senator Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in cases of emergency is where I find the 3/5 is gonna be difficult. Do you find that also? For example, if the state passes something that affects the municipalities, and municipality needs to make a move or an appropriation on that, and they don't, they're gonna depend on a 3/5 now instead of a simple majority?
No, my understanding with regards to emergency situations and current New Hampshire law is that that's a special situation where the governing body would need to petition the court for emergency expenditure, and then a special meeting would be held. And that's a completely different situation
All right, so,
than what this bill addresses.
all right, so an emergency wouldn't be,
Not,
Additional questions,
okay,
Senator?
thank you. No, I'm good.
Senator Lang?
So I'm looking at the one line in here is on line 8 that I'm not sure of. It says, but the question shall not be placed on the official ballot used to elect officers. So if for some reason I'm not sure what you're doing there. It's on line 8, right in the middle. But the question shall not be placed on the official ballot used to elect officers. So is that saying specifically under the traditional town meeting? Well, traditional town meeting, it would be in front of the legislative body.
Right.
I just don't know
So
what this line is here for.
at a traditional town meeting, it would be by a secret ballot. It wouldn't just be simply by raising a hand in a card vote. That's what that pertains to. Whereas if you had SB2, of course, all warrant articles are voted on the official ballot. So it's just making the distinction that in a traditional meeting, you're not putting the question on the official ballot, because that's separate. Election of officers is on the official ballot, whereas in a traditional meeting, voting upon warrant articles is at the meeting.
So again, in an SB2 town, you're talking a 2-page warrant article regardless. If the only thing you were voting on was elected officials and the budget, it can't be on the same ballot at the bottom of the page. I have my elected officials, and at the bottom of the page, I put the budget article on there to vote yes or no on. I'd have to do a different sheet of paper.
The beginning of your question, you reference under an SB2 form of meeting. So these warrant articles would be voted on the official ballot. That's how SB2 works. That's separate than a traditional meeting.
All right, additional questions? Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Chairman. So the language you're replacing in RSA 32(5)(b)(3) is the legislative body may override the cap by the usual procedures applicable to annual meetings and deliberative sessions of the legislative body. So can you speak to why you feel the need to replace essentially a town or municipality governing its own procedures with this?
What lines is this?
The existing statute in RSA 32(5)(b)(3) essentially allows a town and city to have local control over its own procedures. So can you speak to why you need to replace existing law with this?
Because what we're doing is we're changing the vote threshold with regards to a local tax cap. So right now, if a political subdivision adopts a local tax cap, it's just a simple majority that's required to override it. And that's no different than the vote threshold to say, do anything else. So a local tax cap, a lot of constituents are shocked when they understand how a tax cap really works. It doesn't really do anything. So this bill seeks to put, I guess, teeth in the tax cap.
Follow up, if I may, Chair. So is
ma'am.
there anything in local procedure that prevents the residents that want to see that different from doing that themselves locally?
Changing the vote threshold? I mean, this is what statute is. New Hampshire RSA specifies what the vote threshold is to override a tax cap. This is very different than like a city charter. I think maybe that's what you're, that's the background from which you're coming from. That's completely different than a town, a traditional town meeting, and SB2. That's a separate. And so the answer to your question would be, with regards to a city charter, yes. The under a city charter, the town can vote to change that. That's my understanding. I do not come from a town that has a charter under a traditional town meeting. So this is separate. This pertains to traditional town meetings.
Follow up, if I may.
Follow up?
Would you believe this section of statute that you're changing, and I'm quoting, as municipal budget law, preparation of budgets, it doesn't apply to city charters? So,
It doesn't, no, right.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Representative Stephanie,
Right.
trying to pronounce the last name, but again, because we've had other people, if you agree with something somebody says, you don't need to repeat it. You can say, I agree with, and then just summarize what they're saying. Okay, and everything will be happy. And I do have to go testify on another bill, and the vice chair will take over.
Thank you,
Thank
Senator
you,
Gray.
Stephanie.
And thank you, Senator Lang, and honorable members of the committee. My name is Stephanie Grund. I represent Amherst, which is Hillsborough 34. And traditionally, when there's a new provision of law like this one, the legislative body is asked to enact the legislation. And this bill does not include an enablement clause, but it does become a requirement. And raising the override to a tax cap will become a 35th majority, as it was said before. But there's no enablement clause. This bill also calls out that school districts shall place the warrant article for the SAU budget at the beginning of the ballot, immediately after any warrant articles proposing bonds or notes. Here's a piece of loss of local control. Currently, RSA 194C3 gives the voters the right to choose to separate the SAU budget as a separate warrant article. The current law is an enablement clause. This is not required right now. Many SAUs do not do this. So when this says shall instead of may, we have to ask questions why. My understanding, there's other bills out there that are trying to make this happen, but if that bill does not pass that's out there, what happens with this implementation, because you don't know what shall means versus may. So finally, the bill also requires warrant articles be placed in a very specific order. And this, once again, I look at as a loss of local control. It requires warrant articles be placed to ensure in a very specific order, and basically ensures that tax cap will most likely be hit before the operating budget occurs, because it requires the bond article, the SAU budget, and then an operating budget. So I believe school boards and select boards have the right to determine what order warrant articles are placed on the ballot. Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Representative Rose.
Yes, thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chair.
Rose.
Thank you for your testimony. I'm just reading the minority report that you wrote, and the last line says, the minority believes this bill is removing local choice by deceptively separating RSA language changes in different committees. Are you asserting that the people that we've heard in favor of this bill are lying to us?
They're not lying, but what happened in our committee was I specifically asked, why does this say shall instead of may when it said separating the SAU budget? And I was given not an answer. It was asked a second time we had our executive section, and it was like, I happen to be talking to another representative that's on education, policy, and administration. And we were talking and found out there's a bill in her committee that's doing this exact thing, which has similar co-sponsors. So I was a little frustrated, and I felt it was deceptive that we were not given a straight answer in our committee, that there is another bill out there. And that would have been fine if we were told that, because I would rather have all the information and know that that was out there. And I would say, okay, I understand shall, but I would question, what if the one bill doesn't pass? You now have shall versus may. That's what was my concern.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Representative. Brody?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, and thank you to the committee for taking my testimony. I won't repeat any of the previous testimony that you've heard, but we obviously, as a general principle, believe that the legislative body should be the one that ultimately makes a determination on how much they're willing to appropriate for tax effort in their municipality for warrant articles or their budget, and we believe that a majority should rule in making that determination, whether it's at traditional town meeting or at an SB2 town meeting. I do want to go over how the bill, how we interpret the bill, which is first in the first section, the Roman 3, we interpret it as requires a tax cap override by the legislative body to be done by ballot, even at traditional town meeting, and the balloting will be done by secret ballot at traditional town meeting, a secret yes/no ballot as provided in RSA 40:4-A. It also mandates that SB2 municipalities and traditional town meetings that the vote must be in a 3/5 majority to override the tax cap rather than the existing majority vote in statute. Typically, when the state goes to change local enabling options, it has the municipalities and their voters vote to either readopt or to adopt the new provisions of law. As we've seen with a few bills today, there is no ask of the legislature for the consent of those legislative bodies. It's a mandate, and historically in New Hampshire, we typically ask for consent from the legislative bodies, who are the folks who make these ultimate decisions at their town meetings. I also want to point out a removal of statute that Senator Perkins Quokka pointed out in the existing 32:5-B local tax cap. In the section Roman 3, the last sentence is removed where it says the provisions of this section shall not limit the legislative body's authority to increase or decrease the amount of any appropriations or the total amount of all appropriations. We believe that language is very important for the legislative body, the taxpayers, to determine if they want to spend more on specific projects or in their budget to spend less. And so we actually view this as taking away the power of the legislative body to determine how much they feel comfortable with appropriating for different warrant articles, or specifically in this case, the budget at town meetings. So with those things said, we still think as general principle, if these bills are to move forward, that they should become local options, or if there are to mandate this specific language in statute, that there be some kind of provisions for readoption so you can get the consent from the legislative bodies and ultimately let the voters be the ones who make these determinations. It's not the governing bodies who determine this stuff. It's the voters, and they govern with the consent of those folks, and they can only raise as much and appropriate as much as those voters approve. And with that, I will take any questions from the committee if you have any. Thank you.
Questions from the committee? So I just have one, Bertie.
Yeah.
So it goes to the prime sponsor's comment about it takes 3/5 of people to establish a tax cap and then only 50% plus one to override the tax cap. Do you think those ratios are appropriate? Don't you think that it should take the same number of people that set the tax cap, that if the town is going to vote to, and is going to go beyond, it should take it better than just the 50% plus one to override that tax cap?
Our position, I don't know if we have a position on what exactly the amount should be for adopting a tax cap. I do know that our position is that at town meeting, the legislative body, it should be a majority vote. That's typically been our position on most bills. I think probably I can guess at the intent of the law of having it be 3/5 to adopt is requesting a supermajority to start having a tax cap. And don't forget, tax caps are just a limitation on what the governing body can present as total expenditures, as the amount that they're allowed to present in their budget and how much spending increase, whether it's a fixed dollar amount or by tied to the CPI, the inflation rate, and a percentage thereof, or even just a strict percentage. So I think the logic is to be able to adopt that new budgeting process for the entire municipality and place limitations on the governing body. There should be a supermajority. But we believe when it comes to going to town meeting and adopting warrant articles, adopting spending, or adopting amendments to warrant articles, or to the amount of spending in each warrant article, it should be a majority vote.
Okay. Seeing no further questions. Thank you, Bertie.
Thank you.
And our last speaker is Eric.
Thank you, committee members and Chairman Lang. For the record, my name is Eric Power. I'm from Brookline. And I'm speaking in favor of this bill. I think it's a good bill because, as you heard earlier, the tax cap's adopted by 3/5. It makes sense to have it overridden by 3/5. And I did research across the country, and I could not find a single tax cap that was overridden by a simple majority. Some of them had 2/3, some of them had 3/5, but there are always some sort of supermajority. So this is kind of an anomaly that it can only be done by a simple majority. To answer Senator Lang's question about in that section there about lines 8 and 9 on the page 1, the idea of a tax cap is that you do the normal procedures in voting until you actually exceed the tax cap, and then if you're at a traditional meeting, you would then go to a secret ballot vote. It can't be a voice vote because it can't be the moderator judging, it was more than 3/5. So you just go to a secret ballot vote. It's not a 1 hour vote. It's just a secret ballot vote for people at the meeting for any time you want to override the cap. So that's how that works. If you have SB2, you already have a secret ballot. So now you just figure out after the voting completes, you figure out which article would trigger a tax cap, if any, and then that would determine whether the threshold is majority or supermajority 3/5. I've talked to some people in our town. We have actually in Brookline, in our Brookline School District, we have adopted the local tax cap. An 8% local tax cap we adopted about 7 years ago. And people are surprised to me. They're like, how can we have a tax cap? We voted to put this in and we're just being overridden by a simple majority. This is not right. And I said, well, that's the way the law is. And, but they like, well, where I came from, tax caps were super majorities. And I said, well, maybe we can fix that. So that's what this bill is about. There are other towns and school districts across the state have also adopted tax caps and have similar views. I would say that to the applicability clause, the legislature often will change enabling legislation and not require readoption. And that's the prime example of that is the whole SB2 system. SB2 system, since it was enacted in 1995, has been changed probably 24 times or more. Did we go back and make every town or school district that have SB2 readopt it after the change? No, we didn't. All the changes became effective. That would be the same thing here. If the town or school district doesn't like this, they can vote to rescind it. If they do not like the supermajority, I don't think anybody will, but I think that's important. And I've also talked to others across the state, and the reason there's only about 8 towns and school districts that have adopted a local tax cap is that some people don't think it's worth it because we can pass it. It's a real tough thing to pass. And once we pass it, then it's just overridden by a simple majority. So it doesn't seem like the lemon's worth the squeeze, for lack of a better term. So if you do put this in as a super majority, I think it would be a much more popular option. And we already have this in the school district budget cap, which towns can't use yet. I know there's a bill, Senate Bill 105, to do a town budget cap, but that's not quite available yet. And so for those reasons, I would recommend ought to pass on this bill. And I hope that you will give it that recommendation.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you for testifying, Eric. So that's the final speakers. Anybody else who wishes to speak on Senate Bill 200? Seeing none online, there was 6 in support, 167 opposed. I'm going to give this back to the chair because I have the 11 o'clock up in election law.
And with that, we'll close public hearing and open the next one in just a minute. Yeah. In fact, they started without me. But it's all right.
Same
Too.
thing in mine, too.
You can move up to the table, Representative. All right, with that, we'll open the public hearing on House Bill 374.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and honorable committee members. As the prime sponsor, I appreciate the opportunity to bring forward to you today House Bill 374. For the record, I am Representative Diane Power. I represent the towns of Brookline, Mason, and Greenville in Hillsborough County Districts 36, and I also serve as the chairman of the House Municipal and County Government Committee. This bill before you is an important bill that simply makes corrections and clarifications to 2024 Senate Bill 383 that was signed into law last year. Some issues were identified as both towns and school districts began applying the new local tax cap and the new school district budget cap laws during this past annual meeting season. So the goal of House Bill 374 is to ensure that all towns and school districts have a clear understanding of local tax caps and school district budget caps as to how they are both proposed and adopted. So just as an overview, House Bill 374, as amended by the House, does these following high-level items. It corrects references between paragraphs within RSAs. It adds and corrects important references in statute, including those for population and average daily membership. It also adds missing statutory warrant article language in certain cases, and it clarifies that an existing tax cap can be modified by adopting a new tax cap, and the same also for an existing budget cap. And lastly, it changes the date that the annual inflation index is used from January 1st to October 1st in order that data point is available for the budget season. And I've prepared a chart, a side-by-side comparison of current law and this bill to make it easier for you to digest the changes in this bill. And I provided a hard copy handout. So to conclude, I urge the committee to recommend this bill ought to pass, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the senators? Senator Perkins Spoken.
So are these all local options for adopting a tax cap?
Yes.
Okay. And I think with the operation of tax caps, part of what's hard is obviously we're seeing cuts to our state budget. So there will be costs like special education, for example, that come down to our cities and towns. And so how do you envision this kind of working if, we have increased costs being passed down from the state that our local cities and towns have to take care of?
So to be clear, this is not new legislation. This bill, I referred to it as a housekeeping bill, but apparently my colleagues across the aisle didn't like that because they felt that there was too many housekeeping items in it. This bill has nothing to do with whether you're in support of a local tax cap or a school district budget cap. It makes important edits or clarifications to these statutes. So that would be my response.
Additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Representative Stephanie, and I still didn't listen to the last name enough to hear it.
Thank you, Senator Gray, and thank you, honorable members of the committee. My name is Stephanie Grund, and I represent Amherst, which is Hillsborough 34. And this bill has multiple concerns in the discussion of implementing tax caps, which they're already implemented, so I just want to address the changes. I understand the original intent was enablement and appreciate the concern of taxpayers, but there are a few concerns. What is the effect of bonds if using the CPI or municipal cost index? If a bond is approved by voters, the first year is interest only, and the second year is the first full payment, which would exceed the tax cap. We've talked about the concern of bonds before. But the second year of that first full payment, how is it calculated into the tax cap calculation? You use CPI, municipal cost index. You're automatically going to exceed a tax cap probably pretty quickly. The concern of, again, it says school district shall place the warrant article for the SAU budget at the beginning of the school district warrant article. I addressed this in a prior bill. I'm concerned about dictating the order of warrant articles being placed in front of voters. Let me just find my point so I'm not repeating information. So one question, section 5, it states that the question shall now not be subject to amendment by the legislative body. And I'm wondering why we would treat this warrant article different than other warrant articles. If a budget of special warrant article can be changed at a deliberative session or at a town meeting, why can we not change this one? Why are we treating it special? And then finally, the bill takes away what used to be considered acceptable, which is a simple majority, and it creates a 3/5 majority on voting for the override and tax cap, which was discussed prior. So I will leave that simply.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Colby. See, I called you the opposite way this time, so that
That was clever. I
you have to worry
appreciate
about
that.
repeating.
And I went through to make sure. Thank you, Chairman and Senators. Again, Representative Colby from Merrimack 9, that's Bowen Hopkinton. This bill as amended would allow a governing body to choose an inflation index from either the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics through the Consumer Price Index or the Municipal Cost Index that's published by American City and County for the official ballot question regarding a tax cap. However, the most concerning part is it prohibits the legislative body from amending the question. In my mind, this strips them of the fundamental right to determine which index might be best for their community. To date, these indices provide up to 2 percentage points of variation. Also of concern is the Northeast Consumer Price Index specifically is not listed as an option. This index is vital as it more accurately depicts the increased cost of living, working, and otherwise operating in the Northeast region. So while CPI is listed at 2.4%, the Northeast region CPI is listed at 3.4%. It's unacceptable to infringe on the people's rights to amend a warrant article during their own town meeting, particularly on a matter as critical as this one, which can affect our community's viability or financial stability. Once a local tax cap is adopted, altering it requires a 3/5 supermajority vote. This would mean if a community does discover a flaw in their governing body's choice of an inflation index, then they would be shackled by it, requiring a supermajority to even change the indices that it chooses. Unable to rectify the issue, if they can achieve that supermajority, even 1 percentage point will cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars, which will translate to fewer services or limiting infrastructure repair, foregoing capital projects, or loss of safety personnel for residents. Any restrictions placed on the legislative body are a disservice with expensive repercussions. And they also fly in the face of the democratic process and local sovereignty. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Questions from the senators? Senator Perkins Spoken.
Thank you, Chair. So we know, and thank you, Representative, again for being here. We know that, we've seen some failures to fully fund special education, both at the state and local level. So in your opinion, do having these sort of more expensive tax caps and higher thresholds really kind of hamstring our cities and towns to be responsive to what's coming down from the state level?
I do think that we know there's federal changes that are being made. We know those trickle down to the state to where we are making changes. I believe we should be allowing municipalities to maintain as much control to insulate their residents as possible from all of the chaos or moving parts that are going on now. And I think any form of tax cap or increasing to a supermajority at this point could prove to be extremely detrimental.
Additional question?
Follow up, Chair. Just looking at RSA 32 5B 1 and 2 that this amends. I mean, is there did anything come up in the hearing on the House side about sort of some reason this municipal mechanism isn't working as is, or were there any specific concerns raised with our existing statute?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone have additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank
Brody?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the committee for taking my testimony this morning. My name is Brady DeShays. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association. We were neutral on House Bill 374. We are now opposed because of just the one sentence that was added on line 30. Quote, "The question shall not be subject to amendment by the legislative body," end quote. We believe these decisions should be left to the legislative body as they've always historically been, and the legislative body should be able to amend and change warrant articles at whether it's a traditional town meeting or the deliberative session, the first session of town meeting in towns that operate under SB 2. And I won't repeat everything else that you've heard prior. We generally agree with the retention of local control and letting the legislative body be the ultimate decision makers. And I'll take any questions if the committee has any, and thank
For
you.
those that are interested, he gave us line 30, but he didn't give us the page.
Oh, sorry,
Page
line
4.
30, page 2. There is one on page 4, that's school districts, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of the School Boards Association. We represent municipalities, sorry.
Okay. Questions from senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. Eric?
Thank you.
Thank you, committee members. For the record, my name is Eric Power from Brookline, speaking in favor of this bill. A lot of things already been said about this bill. This bill is really a housekeeping bill. It's based on the Senate Bill 383 that was passed last year, prime sponsored by Senator Keith Murphy, that added in the school district budget cap and also added a new method for local tax caps. And in reviewing that, and as people were putting together warrant articles this year, we found a few discrepancies with references, some definitions that weren't in there. Talked about that, population for towns, ADMR for school districts. There was a missing statutory language for one of the cases that was added in. It was also discovered that if you had passed this, having the January 1st index to be used doesn't make sense because your budgeting season starts earlier. So it was set to October 1st so that it's much more practical from that perspective. Also note that it was clarified that the inflation index can be the municipal cost index, but it can also be any index published by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, not just CPI. It could be CPI, CPIU, CPIU Northeast. Any of them are available. And that was also clarified in this bill. As far as the question shall not be subject to the amendment by the legislative body, that turned out to be a big challenge this year where tax caps were changed from, somebody proposed a tax cap with a inflation-based index, I think it was in Bedford, and it got changed to a fixed-based tax cap and then put up some ridiculous number. It should never have been happening that way. So this here is, this is a serious warrant article to have a tax cap or a school district budget cap. It should be similar. You don't change a bond warrant article. You can vote it down if you don't like it. So it's important that doesn't get messed up again, and that we have consistency in how it's applied across the state. If somebody proposes it, you can vote it up or down. That's the way it should go. And let's see, one other thing here. I think that covers everything I wanted to mention. So for those reasons, I would recommend ought to pass on this to clean up the laws of the local tax cap and school district budget cap so they can work unambiguously for the citizens of New Hampshire. Thank you.
Questions from the senators? Seeing none, thank you very much. There were 6 people Also signed up, did not request to speak. They were all in opposed. And the online was 6 in support, 155 opposed. And with that, we'll close the public hearing. All right, do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. We are in executive session. And let's go back to the old bills first, if I could. Somewhere in here I have my cheat sheet. Okay, first bill I'd like to take up is 230. We were real close on that one before. So close that the motion failed.
I second that.
Senator Lang moves ought to pass. Seconded by Senator Rochford. Additional discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the ayes have it. Objection to consent? It'll be on the regular calendar. I'll take it up. Okay. And bury my cheat sheet here. I held, well, 340 numerically the next one. And I think 340 needs to be held another week. I didn't take any action on it. I don't know that any of you took any action on it. So that'll be held another week. 421. 421. I am not comfortable with requiring the clerks to have to send out these notices. Posting the notices is one suggestion. And also, after they file, since there is a grace period in there saying, okay, you know, if I have, I think Senator Langton, when he explained it to me, he said if there's 30 people that are supposed to submit these notices and 5 don't, then it's a lot easier to contact those 5. And so,
So yeah,
Yep.
again, the idea was being, you have last year's list of tax exemptions, and you know, I had 30 people who filed last year for the exemption. Only 25 of them submitted this year. It's that you would just have the clerk call or contact those 5 that failed to, and just remind them, say, hey, because there is a grace period, but they have a requirement that they reach out and make contact with them to remind them of the notice. And then I also think the posting is also good to act as a precursor to that, to remind them, don't forget you had this coming up. So if the committee's willing and likes that idea, I'll be happy to draft an amendment that will do something like that, that says, we'll put the posting requirement that, you know, prior to the deadline, that there'll be a notice placed on the town website or where they normally post meetings. And then the second piece will be in the event that the town will use its previous year's records to send notices to any person who didn't file, to remind them after the filing period, to give them a grace period of filing. I was thinking a week after, to give them time to collate the data, and they'll send it a week after the deadline saying you didn't file, you have 1 week to file.
Yeah, I personally think that's great. I just wonder if March 31st is the right date for that. I know obviously the towns are trying to set their tax rate. I think it might be enough time,
So
but
I'll talk to DRA and I'll find out. But because they're the ones that are going to be involved in the exemption goes directly to your tax rate. And so talk to DRA about that, if that date works for them.
Okay, so that one goes on the status underlying to amend. We've already talked about 464. You have the sheets that I prepared and I'm going to take to OLS. And hopefully that'll, when the public hearing happens, that we will have those and that you will be well prepared to provide additional comments on those. All right, and the last one is 626. We have an amendment on that one. Do I have a motion on the bill?
I'll move ought to pass on 626.
We have a motion of ought to pass
I'll second.
on 626. And do we have a motion on the amendment?
Yeah, I'll move amendment
15.
1590S.
Okay. And I'll second that. Okay. The amendment was drafted by the Secretary of State's office. I have no complaints with it. Comments from you guys? Seeing none. All right. All those in favor of amendment 1590S, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. And now we have the bill as amended. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it.
Move consent.
We have a motion for consent.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed nay. And it's on consent. And who's the prime sponsor of this? Oh, nobody's on there, so I can take that one out too. Yeah. All right, that takes care of the old bills. Is there any of the bills that we heard today that you guys want to discuss?
House Bill 124, I know that there was talk about an amendment. Is that something we could do in committee today?
Seemed like it.
It is. It is up to you guys.
Then I'll move
You
ought to
control.
pass on House Bill 124.
Second.
All right, so we have OTP. What's for? Okay, and I'm guessing we're going to have a committee amendment.
So if I recommend a committee amendment.
Yep.
And change where, and have it say on line 7, if the fund's expending authority determines that the special forest fund. So whoever the expending authority, that when you establish a fund, you have to establish an expending authority. Whoever is defined as the expending authority in the establishing determines that it's excessive, they can go to the select. That would be my recommended.
All right, try it one more time
If-
so that.
So on
Jessica-
line 7, right after the RSA citing, strike the rest of that sentence and add in, if the fund's expending authority, and then continue on determines. So whoever the town's defined as the right to spend money from that account, they get to decide whether to.
Further comments, further suggestions, all right. And Senator Lang moves the amendment and.
I'll second
I will-
that.
Okay, Senator Rochford seconds it. Any questions on the wording or anything? Okay, all those in favor of the committee amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it.
Move consent.
Well,
Gotta pass the bill.
Oh,
Back to the
that's
bill
all
as
right. All right.
amended. I-
Slow
I-
down,
getting
slow
it.
down, racehorse.
Too much coffee this morning.
I try to
Happens
hurry
me.
it off
It's
into.
a long drive.
Okay, the bill as amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it.
All right, Jay.
Senator
All right,
Rochford
now I'll
moved
move
consent.
Second.
All those in favor of consent say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And
I move Senator Rochford, take it out.
Yeah, I'll take it out.
Did you vote against the bill? Oh.
Senator Rochford made the original
Yes,
motion.
I'll
And
take
so, you know, that's the first consideration that I have is usually who made the first
He's
one.
fired up this morning.
I know, I'm ready to go.
Amen. All right. 138 and 284. Again, as I stated before, to the two authors, sponsors, I hate legislation that deals with that same chapter without being combined. So if they choose to give me an amendment that combines them, I'll be much happier. Any comments from you guys on either of those two bills?
So, Mr. Chair, again, they do conflict as they amend the same exact chapter of law. So you can only pass one of them or amend one. I actually prefer the 138L myself. It's the one that just says on a multi-year contract, we have to notice, just like we do for teachers union contracts. That's the one I would prefer. That says that if you're going to enter into a long-term lease, then you have to let the citizens know, by the way, this year it's going to be this much, next year the estimate's this much, and give at least a 5-year out span so they understand exactly what they're voting on. That's all that does. I think it's a clean solution, and also, like I said, falls in line with what we do with CBAs.
Okay. I still would like to hold this for at least a week to give them an opportunity. Again, having that amendment will allow us to pass the bills individually, to not pass the bills, and to have them combined. So I don't think that's unreasonable for us to wait a week to do that.
All right.
168 is the next one.
I'll move on to pass on 168.
Second.
To pass, OTP, Birchford and Lang. Any comments, additions?
No, pretty straightforward.
Okay. Seeing no additional comments, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it.
Move consent.
We have a motion for consent. Second. Lang and Lang, or Lang and Long. My tongue working here. All those in favor of consent say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Ayes have it.
I'll take that one out.
Hey, double duty.
I know.
All right.
Two reports to approve this week.
200. I wasn't here for that, so tell me.
Well, Chairman, from my perspective, this bill replaces a perfectly good piece of statute that says if a local municipality wants to change their local procedures for overriding a tax cap, they are welcome to do that, and replaces it with something the state is kind of telling them how to do it. It also makes changes to how our school district budgets are placed on the warrant. So to me, this is really an unnecessary bill, and I think we could just rely on our existing law. Personally.
All right. I will want to watch the video on this before I'm ready to do anything. Any other comments before we?
So, Mr. Chair, again, I tend to actually agree with the principle of the bill. That if 2/3 of the town has said we can't go over a tax cap, and then there's a budget presented that goes over the tax cap, it should take a 2/3 vote to overturn that. That's been the standard set by the town. I think a 50% plus one is irrelevant. Why have a tax cap? It doesn't perform any function. If on a simple vote, you can override it. So I think that the intent of the bill is right. I do want to read a little bit more into it. But given our tax cap bills, I like this bill.
All right. So we have a difference of opinion.
The debate is set.
You guys may want to discuss that outside of here. The last one is 374. 374, I think, has got enough in it, especially looking at the sentence, shall not be subject to amendment in 2 places, that is also one that we should not take any action on today. Does anybody disagree with me?
No.
All right. Anything else anybody wants to bring up in executive session? Seeing none.
Move to leave
Come out of
executive session.
All right. We have a motion and a second to come out of executive session. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. our business of the day being completely adjourned.
Move to leave.
11:30, 25.